All right, it's 3 o'clock Eastern Time. Let's get started. For those of you on the call, this is the monthly Scaling Up presentation. For those of you, as you all are aware, I assume, Scaling Up is call to action number 2022 that the director has as a part of the Centennial next year, and it focuses on large landscape conservation. Ray Savageau is our NLC champion, and he heads up the group. We have a handful of working groups within Scaling Up, and this is the part of the tools team. This is, I believe, the 6th in a series of monthly webinars that we've sponsored, and today's topic is on a landscape planning tools employed by the Nature Conservancy, which is, of course, an important conservation partner. We're lucky today to be joined by Joe Farigone, and Joe is the Science Director for the Nature Conservancy's North America region. And Joe does a lot of research and works with his staff to employ and balance human energy and food demands with environmental conservation. They look at, among other things, appropriate siting for new energy development and new sources for conservation funding, including natural infrastructure, compensatory mitigation payments, carbon offsets, etc. Joe has a PhD and lives in Minnesota. So with that, let me pass it on to Joe, but one other thing I want to just ask folks is to not put your phone on hold. It's great if you can mute your phone. I'd appreciate that, but do not put your phone on hold. We may get a beeping sound if someone does that. So again, please mute your phones, but don't put them on hold. And we'll have some time for questions later on after Joe's presentation. So with that, I'm going to transfer my screen to Joe, and Joe, you can get started.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Thanks, Brian, for inviting me to this. Let me know if you have any problems with the visuals or audio while I'm talking. And so I love that we're getting to talk about scaling up and large landscape conservation. That's something that the Nature Conservancy spends a lot of time thinking about. And so I want to talk today, rather than going really deep on any one subject, I thought I'd do more of a survey and let everyone know some of the things that we're up to, and then try and leave some time for questions that people may have. So I'll just talk briefly about a little bit about TNC. I hope most of you are familiar with the Nature Conservancy, but to tell you a little bit more about who we are, and then talk about some tools and some analyses that I hope you'll find relevant for thinking about scaling up. So who is the Nature Conservancy? By some measures, we're the largest conservation NGO. We were founded in 1951. We're essentially the first land trust. We have about 1 million members. We work in all 50 states, more than 35 countries around the world. We take a pragmatic, non-confrontational approach, and we've helped protect a lot of land. We also do freshwater and marine conservation work as well. We started out focused on land protection, but we've since expanded and also work on freshwater protection and marine conservation as well. So that's a little bit about TNC, and we talked about TNC being a partner with the National Park Service, and here's a little screenshot that shows most of our offices. So we'll probably have an office near where you work. So so that is part of what allows us to partner across so many organizations. So if you're not familiar with your local TNC folks, I encourage you to meet them. A little bit about how we're organized, and this is not sure, probably no one cares about this, but it's sort of relevant to how we have to think when we're thinking about scaling up, how we have to think cross boundaries. So we are actually one global organization, so unlike some of the other folks that are incorporated separately in different countries, like World Wildlife Fund has a separate, is actually incorporated as separate entities in different countries, and then there's one kind of a umbrella organization. We're actually one entity. So we have 5 regions that all report up to our worldwide office. Within the North America region, there are division directors for Western, Central, and Eastern Division. The country is divided up that way, and then there's individual state directors that report up to those division directors. And each of those state directors has their own board of trustees, or it's a purely advisory board because we have one global board for the NGO, but we've got these advisory state chapter board, and so historically people have been thinking about conservation purely within those political boundaries of their states, and as we think about scaling up, we at the Nature Conservancy realize we have to think beyond those political boundaries to some of these larger systems. And so we have identified whole systems, so in the Great Lakes, in the Southern Great Plains, longleaf pine, Central Appalachians, Colorado River Basin, each of those has a director of a whole system program that is really engaged with thinking about what are the most significant threats and opportunities across that whole system, and how do we work across state boundaries to so that we're not sort of reinventing the wheel, working on different strategies when we could be better coordinated and having a bigger impact across these whole systems. So that's how we've tried to overcome some of those, the fact that our organization has historically been based on those artificial political boundaries. So so that's a very brief overview of TNC. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the tools, and throughout the talk I'll be talking about a variety of science products, some of which come out of my team in the North America region, some of which come out of the great science shop of Mark Anderson's in our Eastern Division, and some of which come out of our global development by design team led by Joe Farigone. So not all work that I've done, but just a survey, again, across the Nature Conservancy of some things that I thought would be of most interest to this group. So we do have a data set that my team manages that has all of the lands that we have helped protect. So it has our preserves and conservation easements, so forth, that you can see them at this website. We also we share annually all of this data with PAD US, so that should already be incorporated into the Protected Areas database of the United States for those of you that are familiar with that. It's a great resource that is the most up-to-date collection of information on protected areas. So we partner with them. We also partner with the National Conservation Easement Database, and so all of the information about our conservation easements gets shared with them. But you can, if you want to just look at TNC areas, you can go to this website. If you zoom in enough, it does show the actual parcel boundary for all of these. So it's a geodatabase in the background. And not from this link, but from our a link on the Conservation Gateway, you can download the geodatabase of these as well. So so we do make this publicly available information, but this viewer, again, is a good way to look at it. And then we have another data set, another website that shares our what we call our eco-regional assessment roll-up. So it's across the 69 ecoregions in the United States, there were ecoregional assessments that were done, and that identified the priority areas that were, if protected, would preserve the full suite of biodiversity in that ecoregion. And so if you go to this website, you can search by species. You can see what protected areas that we've identified for those species. You can also link to the full PDF report from each of those ecoregional assessments. So, so this provides some background on some of the thinking that's gone on over the last 10 or 15 years about where the important places for biodiversity are across the U.S. And then if you're thinking about wildlife corridors and connectivity and understanding where important wildlife corridors might be, I recommend this circuitscape.org website. That Circuitscape and Linkage Mapper are two tools that have been integrated, but they're, the lead developer on them is Brad McCrae, who works on my team in the North America Region Science Department. And
do you want me to put on speaker or?
Oh, it'd be great if folks could mute if they're who are listening just dialed in. So Circuitscape uses circuit theory to model connectivity by simultaneously considering all possible pathways across the landscape. It's used by governments and NGOs, universities all over the world, governments including National Park Service. Folks have used this. It's the most widely used connectivity software in the world. So right now it's being downloaded about 140 times a month. And it's being applied in a wide range of contexts. But if you look at the sort of heat map here, the one green blob is one protected area, and the other green blob is another existing protected area. And the question was, where are the most likely corridors between those two? And so you can see where this heat map shows the places of highest concentration of flow, where you'd most likely expect to see wildlife movement. And that's been integrated into this linkage mapper toolkit, which has been used for a really wide range of approaches. So you can of course create these corridors, but it also allows you to prioritize corridors and habitat patches, and it highlights the pinch points. So where are the most vulnerable places in the landscape, where if that habitat was converted or disrupted by a road, where that would have the biggest impact on wildlife movement, and allows you to identify restoration opportunities. So there's a whole series of publications in support using Circuitscape, all of which can be found on that website. Has a publications list. So those are some of the tools and resources I thought that might be most of interest. And then I wanted to share just a couple different analyses that I think are relevant to scaling up. So we've been spending, at the Nature Conservancy, I've been spending the last several years thinking a lot about identifying places that are likely to be resilient to climate change. So as we protect certain places because there's important biodiversity there, but we all recognize that under climate change, those species might be moving, and that it can be quite difficult to predict exactly, let alone how much climate change will happen, but how species might respond by moving. And so we're adding another filter to our work to say, in addition to having important biodiversity in the present, might we expect that it will also be important for biodiversity in the future? And that we have some hypotheses that we think are pretty well founded about what are some places that might be resilient to climate change. So one is places that have a lot of topographic diversity. So there's different elevations and aspects in relatively close proximity that would allow species to move short distances in order to find a climate that might be similar to one they're currently experiencing. So species could migrate in response to climate change and have a relatively short distance to go. And these are places that are also likely to have a lot of different microsites that would support a large diversity of species both currently and in the future. And so that's one aspect of a resilient site. And then the other is this aspect of connectedness or permeability, so the ability for species that will be needing to migrate in the future to move across a landscape. And so we looked at this a couple different ways, and this is one of them. So this little black dot shows a point being considered, and then there's a moving window where we look across the landscape, and then at each point we look at how far could species easily migrate out from that point, considering existing barriers from habitat conversion or roads or other features that might obstruct movement. So it gives us a sense of the relative intactness. So we think that places that are relatively intact, that have high diversity of topographies, are likely to be more resilient to climate change and to protect a wide diversity of species both in the present and in the future. And the other interesting piece of this work is that we're not only looking at the most resilient places, but we're looking at representation. So if you were to say just places with lots of topographical diversity, then you would just pick like the tops of the mountains with lots of cliffs because, you know, boy, there's a big range of elevation and temperatures and topography there. But in reality, we know that different geology and different soils will support unique species. So we need to protect the most resilient sites that span this, that are representative of each of these. So within this, you know, within the limestone sites, we would like to find the places that are most intact and have the most topographical heterogeneity, and then the same thing with, again, within each of these geographical settings. So that work has been, it's been conducted in the Northeast, in the Southeast, and in the Pacific Northwest, and it's being expanded right now to look across the Great Lakes and across the Great Plains. And so there's some publications that identify resilient sites for terrestrial conservation in the Northeast, in the Southeast, and in the Pacific Northwest. So I don't have links up here on these, but if you were to Google for these sites, you would find these publications that outline the whole methodology and have nice maps. And there are some links to download the data within them as well. Okay, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about some of our development by design work. So this is just one example where some of my colleagues projected out future energy development from both natural gas and wind energy across the Marcellus shale play. So this whole region here shown in the map. And that's published in a peer-reviewed paper. You can see in the journal PLOS One, which is open access. So if you search for that paper, you can download that. And there is, this is one of dozens of publications that do this kind of work where we look at projecting out energy development and then talk about opportunities for improved siting or for mitigation to offset those impacts. So apologies for this cumbersome and long URL here, but I'm hoping that this, I've made this presentation available to Brian, so Brian, you're welcome to share it with people who ask if they want to be able to click on any of these links rather than trying to write them all down during the presentation. And then just as a teaser, this work isn't yet published, but we have looked at, on my team, we've looked at the projections for energy development using the Energy Information Administration's projections out to 2040, and then looked at what the land use implications of that might be. So this, so thinking about unconventional oil and gas development, the black outlines here show the plays where there's shale and tight gas or oil plays, and the gray shows areas of potential expansion. And some of those areas are within the play are not gray, and those are places where there's already been oil and gas development. So what you're seeing is that that there are some areas where there's already been oil and gas development, and what we're saying is there's likely to be more, and some of that could be stimulation of existing wells, or are in places where the landscape may already be somewhat fragmented from oil and gas development. But these gray areas, and this is 1.3 million square kilometers is shaded gray here, are places where there historically has never been any oil and gas development, that the advances in technology from hydrological fracturing and directional drilling now make these potentially economically feasible for recovery, and so would be susceptible to oil and gas development. And the Energy Information Administration's projections, when you look at at landscapes that might be impacted by oil and gas development, and you consider not just the direct footprint of the well pad, but the spacing between the well pads, because there can be a fragmenting influence from the network of roads and feeder pipelines from this development. That area might be, up to 500,000 square kilometers where you would have new oil and gas development. So this is a significant potential for expansion looking out to 2040. So I was asked to talk for about 20 minutes and leave time for questions. So just leaving with the couple of conclusions about this kind of very broad and quick survey of our work. We've got some tools and resources for scaling up and large landscape conservation, and I hope that you consider Nature Conservancy as a partner when you're engaging in your planning for scaling up. And with that, time for questions about anything I spoke about, or anything else that I should have spoke about that you want to bring up.
Thanks, Joe. Any questions from anyone on the phone? I guess a basic question that I have is to what degree, or what's your sense for how all this information is being utilized by the other public land agencies, Forest Service, BLM? How closely are they using these tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been trying to engage a lot with BLM as they are updating their plans for sage grouse. And so, in terms of thinking about places that one would prioritize for mitigation, or one are important for avoiding future impacts. That's one place that we've been engaging a lot. We engage a lot with the solar, the BLM exercise to identify renewable energy zones for solar energy, and so that was one where we were looking at avoiding impacts to desert tortoise and focusing on lands that already had some impact. So there were some areas where we had done remote sensing analysis to show places that were already impacted by invasive species or off-road vehicles that would be that were also suitable for solar development and might avoid some of the more pristine and intact places that would be important for desert tortoise or other species. So those are some places where we've had a lot of engagement.
Great.
Joe, this is Don Barger with NPCA. I'm working on a connectivity project down in the North Cumberlands in East Tennessee, and would really love to access some of this information. Brian, are you going to send the presentation out so we can have those links?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, I've been working with the folks in the Tennessee office, and you guys have got a lot of really fine information that I think we can bring to some pretty good landscape work.
That's great. And yeah, feel free to contact me. I think I neglected to put my email in the presentation, but Brian, maybe you can add that to the title slide before you send it out.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
Joel, this is John Putnam with the Park Service. I'm sorry I joined the presentation a little bit late, so I might have missed this, but I assume most of your analyses are looking primarily at, I guess, biodiversity, wildlife issues, but do you factor in other things? I'm thinking primarily of things like, viewscapes, view sheds. Is that also a factor that gets analyzed?
We don't do a lot with viewscapes or view sheds. Yeah, so that's not much of a priority for us. I recognize that is one of the things that MPS wants to protect. When we consider stuff beyond biodiversity, a lot of it's more in the realm of ecosystem services. So we're thinking about water provision, water quality, carbon storage. So we've been that would be another tool for folks that are interested in that. The Nature Conservancy was one of the founders of the Natural Capital Project, and they developed the INVEST tool for quantifying ecosystem services. So that's another area that where we're quite active.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Joe, this is Nick Lund at the National Parks Conservation Association. On that slide that's showing the shale plays with the gray out to 2040, can you talk a little bit more about the sort of methodology there? Is the gray sort of everything that is yet to be developed within the play, or is there a more detailed analysis of sort of feasibility or other things in there?
The former. It's just very simple. We took the USGS layer of what had oil and gas already and subtracted that out from the whole play, and so we didn't do additional feasibility. Although that has been done. If you get the link to the Development by Design publications page, that we did that for some Nature Conservancy staff did that for much of the western U.S. Looking at the I assume it's USGS slides, and they do they measure magnetism, and then we use some of those layers about bedrock type magnetism and topography, and then looked at all the existing locations of oil and gas wells and projected out some places that look at what's most suitable for development going forward. And it's at a much coarser resolution than the industry thinks. They're thinking about, down to the meter squared, but for our purposes, we just need to be accurate to this half kilometers.
Yeah.
And so for those purposes that we were able to do that, but you have to buy the well location data from IHS for the whole country, which is really expensive, so we're not able to do that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, we got one more minute. Any last question? All right. Well, hey, Joe, thank you. This is excellent information that I think can for our partners, like other partners like NPCA and others that are on the phone, will find helpful. And of course, this is super helpful for us at the National Park Service as well. And we look forward to working more closely with you guys at the national and state level, because as we know at the Park Service, we can only do so much with the land that we have, and it's really important to be talking with folks like your organization to protect and help conserve these broader landscapes. So thank you again, and I will send the PowerPoint, Joe's PowerPoint, around to the listserv that that invited everyone to this presentation, and I'll also actually pull out some of those links to those programs that Joe referenced. So thank you again.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone, for your interest. Appreciate it. Bye.
Take care.